Hello, I'm Bethan Winn and welcome to the replay of the Join the 100 webinar. Charlie Blake and myself talk a little bit about why we started Join the 100, why we wanted to take our businesses carbon neutral, and Gavin Buckley from Carbon Neutral, the company, talks a little bit about the hows and the nuts and bolts of going carbon neutral and what that looks like. Some of the key takeaways are around it's actually a lot easier than you think, probably. And wanting to be a leader in this space, this is something that everyone will be doing in the near future. So be first, go first, go positive. And if you've got any questions, get in touch with Charlie or myself. I'll put the details below. We would love to have you on board to join the 100. Oh, and excuse the rowdy kids. They're part of the why for some of us on the call, so they had to make a cameo because it was kind of bedtime. Enjoy the show.
We, of course, just want to start this meeting just by acknowledging that we're on Wajak Noongar land, acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land. And we extend our respects to their elders, current, past, and emerging. And we want to welcome you to this first gathering here of Join the 100, this community of WA businesses looking to take action on reducing our business emissions, and collective action. And I think that's a term that you'll see us referring back to quite often through this session. And that's a core theme that we want to look at with Join the 100, because one business going carbon neutral is awesome. That's a great achievement. But actually, if we can focus on collective action, and that's really a movement, that's really when we can start to make some noise and really start to build some momentum around what we're trying to do here. So we've got, as I say, a very relaxed format. It would have been nice to do drinks at a pub, but next time, hopefully. But we've got a couple of things that we're aiming for. I don't want to hit you with a very formal agenda, but I think 3 points that we're kind of just shooting for in terms of outcomes for today. And we'll take you on a journey, and Bethan will take you on a journey of achieving these outcomes as we go through the session. But really clarity on Join the 100, what it is and why there's a benefit for joining, what we're all about. We want you to also leave with a really clear action plan for either going carbon neutral or at least taking a next step. So whether that's further staying connected to the community, or just thinking about what action you could take that's a small immediate action that keeps you involved and helps you to start building momentum. But in addition to that, we also want to support you with resources to help make it happen. So we've tried to do a lot of the legwork behind the scenes, and we've also been working with Carbon Neutral, and we'll introduce you to Gavin a bit later on, who supported us on our journey to go carbon neutral. And Gavin's going to talk to us a bit later on in this session as well, and just share a bit more information about Carbon Neutral's approach and hopefully some interesting ideas that will spark some thoughts for you. So we're going to start really as every good drinks in the pub should. Bethan and I would like to just take some time just to introduce ourselves, so you actually know who you're talking to and who you're giving up your Wednesday evening to spend with. Hopefully no one will drop out after that first introduction, otherwise our speed dating won't have gone so well. But then we would like to just hand it over to you and put you into some yes, the family informality is going great already. Thanks, Bethan, for holding the team up. And then we would like to just split you into some groups as well, just so you can have some quick conversations with some of your co-peers on the call as well, just to get to know each other. So, Bethan, I was just about to hand over to you. Do you want to do your intro and say hi to everybody and go and introduce the family? We should have all brought the kids, dogs, pets. Everyone's welcome on this session tonight.
I'm getting extra cuddles because I was away last night for a session. So yes, my name is Bethan. For those I haven't met, hello. I'm a facilitator and trainer, focusing on critical thinking, but I'm also a mum, and I think this is one reason why I'm very passionate about this project. And what am I doing? Why I want to do it? Yeah, I need to mute her so that I can speak to you. So maybe, Charlie, do you want to do your spiel? And then come back to me in a sec.
I'll do that. Bethan did warn me that she was going to need to do a lot of mummy cuddles when she came back, so she's been away. So yeah, to kick off then, my name's Charlie Blake. I run a learning and development consultancy called Neon Leadership out here in Perth, Western Australia, originally from the UK. And the name of the business kind of gives it away. Neon is all about leaders who stand out, leadership that makes a difference, and really stands for something positive in the marketplace. And I really see, I'm an optimist really by nature, and we see business and leadership as a great conduit for positive action in all kinds of social action spaces. So originally when I started the company, we were funding clean water projects, for example. And I know there's other great businesses that have got really, social purpose at the core of what they do. And so what we wanted to do with Neon was help to further that involvement and really stand for the kind of leadership that we advocate others to promote too. So that meant for us finding one of the biggest challenges on the planet right now, which is how do we tackle climate change in a way that is positive and embodies that kind of optimism and that sort of neon spirit. And so we started doing a 1-for-1 tree planting program last year. So we're planting a tree for every person that we trained. It was a very small, simple way for us to start limiting and reducing our impact on the environment through the work that we did. And then this year we kind of upped the ante with our aims to go carbon neutral. And the honest backstory for me was actually it took me a bit of time to find the right people to partner with, to find how to do it, how to measure our emissions. We've got a global virtual team running across 6 countries, and kind of measuring that and trying to be detailed as we possibly could. There were some obstacles in the way, so we had to overcome those. But actually with conversations with Gavin and Bethan and others, we found a way forward. And so for me, Join the 100 was about bringing together other business leaders and saying, look, this is the way to do it, helping to smooth the path for other people that also wanted to go on this journey as well. So it's a huge thrill to see faces joining on this session as well, willing to learn more about the process and see what that looks like for their own businesses and their own lives. So again, a huge welcome and thanks for joining us. Bethan, you ready to be tagged in?
I think so. I've lost them for now.
All right.
Thank you, Charlie. And I'll just briefly share my kind of why and how it's all come about. Similar to Charlie, I have always been conscious of this as an individual, I suppose, and very involved in volunteer and community projects that are about waste reduction and carbon reduction in different formats. And I honestly didn't really realise how straightforward it was to offset carbon for a business, which may sound like, in hindsight, I'm like, what? Why didn't I just Google it? But I literally had never Googled it. I just assumed that it was very expensive, very difficult, something quite inaccessible for someone like me who's a sole trader. So I, budgeted a large amount of money and forayed in and spoke to Gavin, who we already know through 10X project, and went, oh, actually, this is very simple and straightforward. And for me, the business that I run, it was nowhere near as expensive as I thought it was going to be. So I'll just put some numbers on it for those of you that are like, what's a big number? I was thinking, oh, maybe it's $1,000 or something. But for me, the minimum, according to the calculator, would have been probably about $75. And then I put more into it because I thought, well, I don't know if that's exactly right and all that kind of thing. But it was remarkably easy. Gavin and I spoke, it was between Christmas and New Year, because I was like, I want to do it by the end of the year. And I was like, Gavin, are you working today? And he's like, I'll talk you through. And I was like, I think I've got this. I think it's all good. So I had the calculator, which was more complex. And I thought, no, I'll just over budget for it. And and in my professional life, I talk a lot about decision making, problem solving, and acting in line with your values. And so this was a no-brainer for me. Sustainability has always been a key value, part of who I am, and acting in ways that are conscious, you know, just aware of my impact on the world in many different ways. And so once I realized how straightforward it was, I was like, well, absolutely, let's do this. And then connecting with Charlie, who was doing similar time, and we just went, wouldn't it be fun if we could get more people, because we're just small fry, but together the story, the impact could be so much greater. So yeah, we're already lining up. You know, you may have seen I'm number 1 just because I beat Charlie to the actual credit card on the line. Charlie's number 2 today, and we are literally looking for number 3, number 4, number 5, and I think all in all it took me like 45 minutes of time to go from how much is it, paying the bill, like very straightforward. So if you do it this evening, you could be in the top 10, which would be pretty funky, right? So yeah, that's kind of me, and I'm just really excited that you're here, and I'm excited. We've lost Shil now. I was going to give a shout out. He's joining from the UK, and amazing to see so many of you that I know from close by, and also some new faces as well. It's really exciting. There you go. Boom. Handing back to you, Charlie. What's next?
So handing back to me to hand back to you, because I think what we'd like to do is give you an opportunity to talk. This is certainly not going to be a talk from the front type presentation. So Bethan, have you got your finger hovering over the group button? Are we able to do some breakout rooms?
We are. Bear with me. Can I do breakout? Where have they gone? I will. Yes, there we go. Found it.
Do we want to? I'll let you decide how we split, whether we go threes or just split the room. But we want to give you a chance to talk to each other. And really the purpose of this is quick introduction, you know, just say a bit about who you are and your business context or your environment. But most importantly, what has brought you here? What's motivated you to be here on the Join the 100 call? So bit of a get to know you, bit of a context setter, but we really want you to leave this feeling like you're part of a burgeoning community, that you're getting to know some other people, and hopefully we can increase this kind of sense of network as we go through. So is that all okay with you guys? I've got it in tile mode, so nods, thumbs up, waves, that's all good. So yeah, so just quick intro, who you are and what's brought you here to Join the 100. So we'll put a sensible amount of time, a bit more than 5 minutes, I think, probably on the clock, but a good chance just for you to chat, and we'll try and join in as we can. So
there you go.
See you on the other side.
Yes, see you on the other side. And Gavin would as well. Welcome back, everyone. Good chats happening. How did we all go? I'm going to pick on someone. Mary, hello. Lovely to see you. Yeah. I always pick people I know.
It's that thing where you go, don't choose me, and then you get chosen anyway. I was in a group with Charlie and Liam. Obviously, I've met and chatted with Charlie before, but hadn't met Liam, and we only just connected yesterday on LinkedIn. So it was great to hear about how you know this sort of. We had a bit of introduction, and then also just hearing about how important it is for people to start keeping the data, and how you know that's probably one of the biggest struggles to actually getting started. So. This is all kind of real useful fundamental information for me, because I mean my job in being here is being able to then go and tell my network about Join the 100. So yeah, it was a fun chat.
Yes.
Fantastic. And Gavin, how did you go in your room?
No, it was really great. But we had Mike and Leah in the group, both of whom are from Wales, as indeed I originally was as well. So it was a very Welsh group. Which you know we saw personally as an advantage, so we enjoyed that, and of course you being Welsh as well, you know, there we are. But yet, so I think one of the interesting things that came up out of several is that we were talking very much about how there are some people. In fact, maybe Leah, you could say this better. There are some generations, and this is just where we cut off before we finish.
Oh, okay.
There are some people who are kind of causing a roadblock here because they're still on profit.
Yeah, it's still that Jack Welch type mentality, right? Let's get rid of the bottom performers, keep the top ones, and profit, profit, profit all the way. And it's only the younger generation that are coming through that are starting to question this. But I find, and it's not everyone because it's a generalization, but the majority of Gen X and Gen Y seem to have this unconscious bias that it still is profit before planet rather than the other way around.
Yeah. Mike was also talking. Mike is here representing not only himself but also a couple of other organisations which he's on the board, and he's looking to get advice about how they may be able to start to move in this direction as well. But again, the issue of time and cost, particularly for not-for-profit organisations who are very much focused on their cause, can often be a roadblock for some, although I'm not sure it would be with Mike's tenacity, but we'll see how that goes.
Fantastic. And then where's Rob gone? Rob, tell me what happened in your room, apart from me popping in and out.
Really disturbing us, yeah, and thanks for picking on me. I knew you were going to do that. We had, in the room with Nicola and Hilary, we had a really good chat. I think we got onto the point just talking about which countries are ahead of others and who should be pulling their weight.
Oh, Australia's not doing very well on those league tables.
No.
Well, compared to some, we should be compared to the US, we may be in front, but obviously we're behind Europe. So.
Yeah, and I think I said in the chat room when I popped in there, about being able to almost earn the right to criticize the government or big businesses, be the Theodore Roosevelt quote around, be the man or person, non-gender specific human in the arena, getting your ass kicked, taking a risk, putting it out there that this is something that you care about enough to, go public, put some money behind it and add your voice to it. And then it allows you to, say, come on, I've done it, you can do it too, to the businesses, to the government, to whoever needs to hear it, essentially. But yeah, Charlie and I talked about that just a couple of days ago. We're jumping in the arena and we're not sure where it's going or what the consequences will be, but damn it, we're in there.
But the strange thing is, I find where I live, like every second house has got solar panels, and you talk to your neighbours and they're all into it in a big way. And then 500 metres down the road is a heat island being built, brand new subdivision, rows of houses, no space for greenery or trees. And so we're actually working against the other half of the suburb. And yet this is, we're next door to an area picked by Synergy to run one of their trial battery community storage experiments. And you see different parts of government going in different directions. So planning allows heat islands. Synergy wants you to take on the concept of community batteries and storage. And you're sitting in the middle going, but it's gonna cancel each other out, or is it? And it's a challenge.
It is. Yeah, and it is. I think one of the arguments that's been around for so long, and one of the ones which is always I found extremely frustrating, is the one that goes along the lines of, well, I can't do anything until my neighbour does something, and the neighbour doesn't do something. Well, it's not me; it's the business at the end of the street. And the business says, oh, it's not me; it's that much bigger business in the CBD. And then it gets up to the country level as well, and everyone starts pointing fingers and saying, well, we shouldn't do anything until China does something. So I think one of the interesting things that came out of a session that Mary helped curate for us a couple of years back now, is a countdown conference at the State Reception Centre, is that we had the chief executive of now who I've forgotten his name, Mary, it's gone out of my head. It's an age-related thing. As the week wears on, I start to forget things.
You mean David Carter?
Not David from Austral Fisheries, but his friend from Sea Shepherd.
Oh, Jeff Hansen. He's managing director of Sea Shepherd. Yeah, managing
director of Sea Shepherd, and he was making this very clear point. We've got to the point where we've just got to get on with it now. We really do have to, make our own. All of us have to make that transition. We've got to move over to not using fossil fuels, but at the same time, we've also got to suck billions of tons of CO2 out of the environment. And to do that, we're going to have to start working together. And this general finger pointing that has gone on has been, one of the things that's held us back, I think, as a civilization in getting on with all of this. But there we are. But
I think
sorry, go on, Leah. You have your comment, and then I'll jump in. Thanks.
I also think there's this huge reluctance for people to change the way that they live, their home comforts, their variety, everyone jumps online because they're going out on a Saturday night and buy fast fashion and never wear it again, and then buy more the next week. I think society's come so used to having all these choices, and think about it. Years ago, when I was a kid, I didn't know anyone who had a Gucci bag. I didn't know anyone who owned Louis Vuitton shoes. And I'm not from a poor area, but all of these things now are incredibly affordable to just regular folks. So people just want more. And they're not ready to let that go. They're not ready to stop eating meat 5 times a week.
Yeah.
They don't want to do it.
I think to build on the points that have been made there, I think it's just so great to hear this kind of dialogue happening. And that's exactly what we wanted to create the space for. I think the part of the idea behind Join the 100 was exactly some of the things that you were talking about there, particularly Mike and Gavin, this kind of like waiting for the first mover. Who's going to be the first mover? And I think particularly coming from a European background and then coming to Oz, it took me a couple of years to try and figure out who's making the movement here. And looking around in that kind of business space, it's probably where it always has been. Government's probably the laggard. They wait and see what business is going to do, and then they'll probably play catch up. So this was about creating the kind of environment where businesses are already going to front up to the task. But it also was this movement was born out of a sense of global overwhelm. Because I think if you look at the whole picture, it can be very overwhelming. And the idea of owning your space, owning your own backyard. And I think if every business, every person can take responsibility and accountability for that, it almost doesn't matter what the person next door is doing. You can do that with a clear conscience. And guess what? As you grow that sphere of control, or focus on your sphere of control, your sphere of influence grows with it. So it was kind of just born from that space of not waiting for anyone else or government or other bigger businesses to try and do something, but to just start with where we are. And Gavin, hopefully you'll talk about some of the local projects as well with carbon neutral a bit later on. So I think the reason I like this dialogue, the reason so my kids are joining in as well now. The reason that we love this dialogue and want to hear from you is because we want this to be a community feel. This is not a top-down organization where me and Bethan are flying the flag and you're all coming along for the ride. We want this to feel like a community right from the start, and that you all leave tonight feeling like you've got a level of ownership along with it. So please keep talking to us about what you need, the support that you need. We'll keep doing our best to point you in the right direction to the right people and the right resources to help you come on this journey. Bethan's back, but I think we're going to hand to Gavin. Can I throw the ball your way? We've already heard from Gavin a couple of times, but I want to introduce Gavin Buckley, who's from Carbon Neutral. And for full transparency, we are, how should we put this? Bethan and I have both gone carbon neutral through Carbon Neutral. So we both worked with Gavin because we knew Gavin personally, and he was able to assist us with that. And I say that right from the beginning because they've been a great support in guiding us and helping us to get to this point with Join the 100. So I just publicly want to say thanks for that support. We're not in any partnership formally. We're not getting any kickbacks. We're not on commission. But we've invited Gavin to come here because sometimes I certainly found one of the biggest blockers to going carbon neutral was knowing who to partner with or finding reliable people to get reliable information from. And Gavin was able to certainly help us bridge that gap. So to help overcome that inertia for some of you, it might be helpful to have a point of contact. Other ways of offsetting carbon are available, but it's really great to have Gavin here and his valuable insight, and we rate it very highly. And we're glad you could join us this evening, Gavin, just to talk a bit more to this kind of context of enterprises going carbon neutral and some of the benefits around that. So I'll gladly hand to you.
No, wonderful. Well, look, thank you very much, both Charlie and Bethan. I think the work that you're both doing to bring together the small to medium-sized business community in Perth to really focus on this issue, I think, is admirable. And the idea of getting 100 businesses of whatever size over the line in Perth and Western Australia to be one of the 100 by Christmas time is a great target. And as you say, there are other people around who could give advice about carbon. And we're not here today to sell carbon neutral what we do. I'd much rather be able to share some ideas about how we operate, how you can start taking some of those first steps, and also how to look at offsetting and start to think about how your business and you personally can start to react to some of these ideas. Because what's clear is that although the market for carbon neutrality, if you like, has been pretty quiet for many years, it's really woken up in the last 18 months to 24 months, particularly after COP26. The world is recognizing at last. I mean, maybe it's not too late. It's not too late, but we are really in that last waiting room. If we don't get on with doing something now as a civilization across the globe, our environment is going to be screwed. And it's not just the environment, it's the knock-on benefits that will come from that, huge displacements of people, etc. And so I'm not going to go through all the reasons why climate change is a bad thing, because there's been a lot of news and there's a lot of information out there already. I'm also not going to try and just talk through the science, because the science is in. There's no debate about this. Some people may have believe that it's some sort of hoax. It's not happening, but that's not the case. The vast majority of scientists, over 97% of scientists, are absolutely convinced that this is man-made global warming, and we need to do something about it. So the reason I first got involved with all of this, I suppose from my point of view, is that I was running TEDx here in Perth. It was a voluntary position. I've always worked, in fact, I worked for 3 years voluntarily as the chief executive to get the organization up and running and to really engage new audiences and new people, particularly young people, in what we were doing. And one of the objectives right from the start, not least because we were involving young people, and I was chatting to Leah about this in the breakout room not too long ago, one of the objectives right from the start was to make us carbon neutral. Now, I thought at the time, before I got into this field, that it was going to be a massive time suck, and I thought it was going to be extremely expensive. Both those two things were just ideas I had. I don't know where I'd got it from. Maybe I'd heard some of this conspiracy stuff going on in the background. However, what it turned out to be that for a relatively straightforward organization, such as TEDx Kings Park, we run a number of events throughout the year. We have a voluntary team of about 60 people, I suppose. Everyone's working at home, but mainly I wanted to make sure that our events were carbon neutral, because frankly, we're all about spreading good ideas. And TED itself was very, very keen to actually not only just spread ideas, but generate action around the climate crisis. And so we were given the opportunity to work with Mary Phaeton, who was a superb curator to help us pull together our first event that was focused on the climate. And that was the first event in the world, the first TEDx event in the world that was certified was certified carbon neutral. And it was certified under the Australian government scheme, which is called Climate Active, by the way. So you just need to know that scheme is in the background. It's not essential to get yourself certified by Climate Active to be carbon neutral. You can self-certify it. It's not compulsory to get it rubber stamped, as it were, by the government. You can go that route. I chose to go that route with TEDx Kings Park, but for really one very simple reason. I wanted to prove that we could do it. Because I wasn't concerned about it from a marketing perspective or the rest of it. I wanted to show the world that a small, not-for-profit, entirely voluntary organization can become Climate Active certified. Now, whatever one may think, incidentally, of the Australian government's approach to climate on the international stage, one of the things that is pretty vigorous is their certification process. So Climate Active is regarded generally as being a very vigorous and one of the best certification processes in the world. Now, that may not resonate particularly strongly with the way some world leaders and some others view Australia's approach to dealing with the climate crisis in other areas. But Climate Active is a route you can take if you want to be certified. Personally, I think we've now got to the stage with our events, and this is advice I'm just giving, is, you know, we will continue to show that we can do it, that we can get that certification once a year for one of our events. We've got a youth event coming up, and again, that's very important for young people, so we're going to do it for that. But we're actually going to use the fees that normally would pay to Climate Active to plant more trees. Because, you know, paying for bureaucracy is one thing, but actually, you know, getting out there and offsetting the carbon is quite another. So the way the process works, in very simple terms, is it's really a 3-level process. You measure your carbon footprint. It's known as a greenhouse gas inventory, if you want to know what it's known as in a technical term, but it's actually much easier just to talk about it as your carbon footprint. So this is all the emissions that your business is, if you like, responsible for. So if your business wasn't running, how much less carbon would be produced. We measure. We try to reduce where we can. So, for example, I can't remember who mentioned, I think, Mike, it was you, I think, putting solar power on the roof. You know, that is one way in which one can reduce your carbon footprint, because if you're plugging things into the mains over here and you're using Western Australian grid power, you're still burning coal. If you go to Victoria, it's even, the situation is a lot worse, because not only are they burning coal over there to make electricity, they're burning a particularly filthy type of coal as well. So your carbon footprint for burning, if you use 1,000 kilowatt hours in Western Australia, your carbon footprint will be so much. It'll be much higher if you were in Victoria, and it would be almost nothing if you were in New Zealand, because 90% of their grid is actually hydro. So your carbon footprint is generated from measuring the quantity of emissions that you're producing in all sorts of ways. It's the electricity that's getting used, it's the waste that's being generated by the business, water, food, vehicles. Flying is, and we did mention this earlier on actually, flying is extraordinarily bad for the environment. Extraordinarily bad for the environment. And when you go to the Qantas website, I think other airlines are also available, and you buy your tickets and it says to you, do you want to offset your emissions for $4.50 or $3, whatever it is? That's nowhere near enough for what it actually is pumping into the environment. So look, it's a step in the right direction, but frankly, if I need to fly, and you know, inevitably this has to happen sometimes, I will offset by buying. I offset my personal carbon emissions by buying tons of carbon, actually now through carbon neutral. But as I say, there are other sources available. So from the business's perspective, we have created a very simple way for businesses to measure their footprint. It's free. If you go to our website, you can find a measure which we were one of the first organisations to develop a measure, incidentally. So it's a really robust one. It's designed for Western Australia. It's designed for Australia rather, and it's designed for businesses predominantly. So it will allow you to go through your carbon footprint. You can save your work as you go along. You can gather information about your electricity bill. So, for example, if you know that your electricity bill last quarter was $750, then you put in $750 and the spreadsheet knows what the emission factors are to work out what your carbon emissions are from that. So it's valid for this current year, because obviously the emission factors change as our electricity grid decarbonizes, which we certainly hope it will sooner rather than later. And indeed it must, because we've all of us, let's face it, all of us have got to get to net zero by 2050. This pen, this paper, the computers we're looking at, all of this has to be net zero by 2050 at the very latest. So, you know, there's a real job of work to be done there. So at the moment, one of the ways you can reduce your carbon footprint is to put the panels on the roof. You could get an electric vehicle which charges off those panels if you need to drive. But there are some things you simply cannot get away from at the moment. So, for example, if you're running a fishing fleet, Mary earlier on mentioned the excellent people at Austral Fisheries and David Carter. There's a really good case study about what he's done with his business on our website. He's also given a really great TED talk, which you can tune into and look at as well. I mean, he has taken his fishing fleet, his entire business, carbon neutral. And it's a tough thing to do because, you know, a lot of the cost in his business is diesel for the boats. And there simply isn't an alternative. If you're going to go fishing in a boat, at the moment, there aren't electric boats. Those technologies will start to emerge. So at present, there are some emissions that simply we cannot reduce out of our lives altogether. And for that, that's where we use offsets. Now, what really appealed to me about the offsets and why I actually joined Carbon Neutral from TEDx was because I love the idea that you could use offsets which were based around nature-based offsets. So there are offsets available in all sorts of projects in many different industries all around the world. So, for example, if you've calculated your carbon footprint is 100 tons of carbon, incidentally, a ton of carbon, if you want to know what carbon dioxide, if you want to know what that looks like, it's a cube 18 feet square, 18 feet cubed, I should say. Okay, so imagine a telegraph pole and imagine that makes a cube. That is 1 ton of carbon, and it actually, carbon dioxide, and it does actually weigh 1 ton. So that's the kind of volume we're talking about there. So the more tons you produce, carbon offsets are sold in tons. So effectively, you can claim your business as carbon neutral if you've measured your previous financial year, or your previous calendar year, you've worked out what your footprint is. Or if it's a bit complicated, you've got a consultant to do it for you. Either way, you've got your footprint. If you then offset that, you can claim to be carbon neutral. But the idea is that you then have to go back and constantly seek to reduce your carbon footprint to the point where, as I said, we all need to be there by 2050, if not sooner, to net zero. So at the moment, what we're doing in one of our carbon projects is to say, if you want to, we can sell you carbon offsets in a wind power project in China. It's great, you know, it's generating wind power. There's projects in the Brazilian rainforest you can invest in. The one that I particularly loved, and it's my favorite, and, you know, again, full disclosure, it is the jewel in Carbon Neutral's crown at the moment. We're developing new products as well, but this one is really fantastic. It's called the Yarra Biodiversity Corridor. It's right here in WA. It's the largest natural biodiverse carbon sink in Australia. We've been working on it for years. So far, we've planted 30 million different trees and shrubs. Sorry, we planted 30 million trees and shrubs of about 66 different varieties. To make an arboretum of 30 million different trees would be really quite an achievement. But what we do, we take agricultural land that has gone past its useful life. Unfortunately, you know, the combination of climate change means that, you know, there's not enough water to grow crops. You might get a crop off there once a year, perhaps. Plus the fact there's been sort of really quite dodgy farming practices going on from when the land was cleared, you know, many years ago, and perhaps even more currently as well. So we buy these redundant properties, which effectively just become weed patches. And we replant them with 66 different varieties of shrubs. So not only is the planting biodiverse, but it also brings back biodiversity in terms of the fauna as well. So insects, the animals that thrive off the insects, the birds, the lizards, you know, etc. So we're working to restore that biodiversity too. And there are other so-called co-benefits, which when you're buying a carbon credit, it's important to look out for. So it depends on the story you want to tell. So, you know, I was talking to one of my clients earlier today, and then they were saying, look, what do you advise? Should we just buy these cheap credits that are coming out of wind farms in Turkey? And I said, well, yeah, if you want to, if price is an issue, that's a perfectly good thing to do. You know, you're offsetting your carbon. However, you know, if you really want to tell that great West Australian story, say what you're doing for the environment right here in WA, that you're restoring a landscape that's been devastated by farming. We're looking at biodiversity. It's investing in local communities. It's improving water supply. It's improving the soil. It's helping to sequestrate carbon into the soil as well, which is a new and very exciting area for us too. So that's really the process at the moment. We obviously all have to get down to net zero at some point, the sooner the better, but by 2050 at the very latest. But in the meantime, what we're trying to do at Carbon Neutral is to start sucking as much of that carbon out of the environment that's already in there and using those credits effectively to plant more and more trees. And that's the way the market works. So we go out there, we buy the farms, we clear the land of the weeds, we prepare the land, we plant. At the moment, in various nurseries up and down Western Australia, we've got 2 million seedlings of various trees and shrubs waiting to go in the ground. As soon as the winter rains come, we'll be out there planting them. Well, not me personally, but we have a team of great people to go out there and do it. There's also a machine that helps us to do it as well. And we care for that stuff, and that land is tied up legally for at least 100 years. So even if we go out of business, we sell the land to somebody else, there's nothing anyone can do to take those trees away. They are there in perpetuity. And so, it's a wonderful thing. And when I go up there and I see this stuff growing, it makes my heart sing, because not only is it about the carbon, it's about all those wonderful extra benefits as well, which are being delivered alongside the project. And so by selling carbon credits, organizations such as Carbon Neutral can go out there and invest in projects such as this, which will reduce our carbon load. As I say, we're particularly interested in nature-based ones. There's others as well, from the destruction of nitrous oxide. That doesn't sound particularly romantic, but it is a carbon credit. Is it a carbon credit? Through the wind farms, cooking pots in Rwanda. That's another great offset you can get, which we've been selling. Unfortunately, they've sold out because they're so popular. But in Rwanda, there are people who are using very inefficient cook stoves, which require a great deal of wood to be gathered and then burnt. And so by making these more efficient, it means that people not only you're saving wood from being burnt, but also you're saving time for people. They don't have to spend all their time now going out looking for wood so they can cook their food. They've got time for education. They've got time for other things. So, I imagine a world one day, which is perfectly achievable, if we just put our mind to it. I imagine a world one day when we wake up where we're not reliant on fossil fuels anymore. We have got to stop using fossil fuels. And and I've got to be honest with you, buying offsets and planting trees is part of the solution. It's part of the solution. It is not the solution. We can't allow ourselves to continue burning coal and oil and everything else and just say it's okay to plant trees to offset that in the long term. We've got to fix it. So,
Gavin, I was going to ask you about that, and I think you've made a great point there that other people will be interested in. What I really liked about the model that you put forward, we're going to be sharing something with you after this session as well. It kind of maps out these steps in a bit more detail to support you further.
Yes.
But it is this idea of, measure, reduce, then offset.
Yes.
And I think that was one of the things I thought was great about your methodology, really, is there are 2 steps before the offset stage.
Yes.
It's not just buy the offset and get rid of your guilt and then don't worry about it till next year. There was this kind of ongoing efficiency gain that actually seemed to be beneficial to the business anyway, because I'm going to call on Leah in a minute. She's a good one for management thinkers. Was it Peter Drucker who said you can't improve what you can't measure? Something like that.
What gets done gets measured.
There you go. So there's something about the measuring as a first step that gives you that kind of awareness about what's happening in your business, where you can see where those leaks are, and there may be some surprises for you as well about where the benefits are. So that measure and then reduce step, absolutely key, and not just offsetting. So really good points. If there are any questions for the floor from Gavin about particularly offsetting your particular context, you're welcome to put those in the chat. Leah, do you want to jump in with yours? I can see your hand up first. Just take yourself off mute, Leah. Sorry, hang on.
Sorry, I've probably got a dopey question. because I was eating my tea and trying to listen at the same time. You know that the carbon the carbon offset tool, so you can calculate your carbon consumption.
Yeah.
I missed whether you can plug into it how much meat and stuff that you consume, which requires carbon. Does it do that?
Yeah, I mean that is more that you can look at a domestic carbon calculator, which would often include that. But yes, food is something which is included in the business calculator as well, and also wastage. Now you may think, well, wastage doesn't produce CO2, but so carbon is measured in CO2 equivalents, as I'm sure you may know. So when you see that sign CO2, then with a hyphen E. It's an equivalent amount of CO2 that's being released, because other gases are being produced as well. So if you chuck a load of food into a landfill and it goes to waste, then that will not produce CO2, it'll produce methane, which is even worse for the climate.
Because look at all the businesses that do consume food, and even coffees and dairy and things like that. You know, there's very few businesses that don't have any consumables in that sense, is there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the killer will always be the fossil fuels at the moment. When you say there are other areas such as, I mean, if your business is in the meat industry, then clearly that is an area which you would have a higher measure for. Many businesses might, order in food for sandwiches or have a staff canteen or something like that where people are eating, and they'd need to include that in their measure as well. So yeah, the more complicated, the more complex the measure comes, the more businesses will come to organizations like us and others and say, look, can you measure that footprint for us? Because we want to have that, independent view. And so that's something that can be done. I mean, there are consultants out there who can measure your footprint, and they can look at the specifics of your industry. And particularly if your business is based overseas, Charlie mentioned this earlier on in his introduction, he does a lot of work in Europe, and he's got consultants who are based over in Europe. So the emission factors that they are exposed to in Germany, for example, will be different to the emission factors for electricity that we're using here in Western Australia. So, it'll vary from country to country. But yeah, so the thing is, you need to look at your business and say, all of the stuff that I'm responsible for, that is happening as a result of my business, that is what I need to measure and put into my carbon footprint. Now, for many sole traders or for a household, that really isn't a very difficult thing to do. So because it's pretty straightforward, you have all the records, etc. And so as your business gets more complicated, if one of the large banks was here with us today, doing their carbon footprint would be a more complex operation. But that's why they're bigger. That's why they can afford it, and that's why they can start to do something about it.
The other thing to consider, though, is really looking into if you're going to remove something from the way that you do business in the value chain, you really need to look at what you're replacing it with, because a lot of businesses think that they're replacing part of their value chain with a lower carbon option, but because they haven't looked at the whole thing that they're replacing it with, somewhere down the line it's touching fossil fuels, or it takes more energy to make the alternative than it does the one you're using. Yes. And so you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. It
can be a really specialist area, and yes, and when you get into those complex areas, there are consultants out there which I recommend you use. Incidentally, if you're going to go the climate active route, you do need to use a consultant to do it for you. That's part of the deal. But there's nothing to stop you right now just saying, okay, well, tomorrow I can sit down, I'll work out my carbon footprint for my business. I don't know whether you work at home, Leah, or whether you have an office, or what car you're using. But you can put together a profile of your business relatively straightforward. You always do it, incidentally, in retrospect. So you don't say, okay, let's measure it for 2022 when I'm going to start now. What you do is you look back at 2021 or your previous financial year, and then you say, okay, that was the measure. So technically it's more along the lines of measure, offset, reduce, and then rinse and repeat. So each year you're measuring what's hopefully becoming a lower carbon footprint. Some of that stuff you'll have control over, so you can stop eating meat in your business. Some of it you will be reliant on synergy, because as synergy phase out coal and bring in more sustainable methods of producing electricity, it means the electricity that you're using right now will get cleaner. But if you want to circumvent that and go, so yeah, the idea is it encourages this virtuous circle. And what then becomes interesting is when then businesses interact with each other, because a number of local authorities actually are doing some really good work in this area. Local government, they will start, and they indeed already have started, saying to their suppliers, "What are you doing about your carbon footprint? If you want to pitch for this business, you need to tell us what are you doing." And it's not going to be long before they'll be saying, "You need to be carbon neutral if you're going to work with us, because if you don't, we're going to have to offset your carbon for you." And that will then become, this is the only way we're going to get to net zero. So we've got a lot of work to do around here. So
Thanks.
I think one of the key things, Charlie, sorry to interrupt you again, is that for smaller businesses, it really isn't that hard to do it. And it really isn't that expensive. A ton of carbon, if you want to offset it, even in our Yarra Yarra corridor, by the way, which is a nice quality project with a great story to tell, it's $29 a ton. Plus GST, that's all it is. So if your business as a sole trader is producing, the average tonnage that's produced by an Australian person, by the way, if we even it out over the whole population, it's about 16.5 tons of carbon is emitted by each of us. But that means we're taking on for everybody else. So as you can see, it's even if you don't measure, you just say, right, okay, for me as an individual, I want to offset my proportion of what Australia's per capita is. You can do that, and that incidentally, that is the highest in the world.
And I think that's a great, call back to simplify this, because I know we've got different people from different business contexts and different environments interested in this from different angles. So I think that last point of simplicity is an important one, because it can feel like it's an overwhelming step, or oh my gosh, I've got to measure all the meat in my fridge, and suddenly it's like it's off-putting. Now again, that might be part of your initial measure or something you consider. Gavin and I had this conversation, but we really had to think about neon. Where are we going to throw a bag over this? What are we actually is in and what is out here? And actually, I didn't need that many sleepless nights about getting lost in all the detail, because a kind of more general calculation was fine, or some of the things we could just rule out, and I didn't need to think about every sandwich I've had for the last year and on what was in it. So we were able to kind of simplify it and make it a bit easier. So if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, then don't. You can just take a step back. And remember, the goal for this is not to measure, reduce and offset your emissions this evening. You might be able to, but not everyone will be able to. But you might want to think about what that tangible next step is to keep momentum going, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes. Mary, did you just want to ask your question quickly? And Gavin, I'll just ask you just for a quick response, just because we want to get to the crew, just in case there's any more questions, and just for some final kind of wrap up conversations. But Mary, did you want to ask your question?
Yeah, Gavin, I was just curious about the offering that you have through Carbon Neutral of the different offsets that people can choose, because obviously you've talked about the Yarra Yarra biodiversity corridor being the premium, but how do you decide what's okay for Carbon Neutral to offer, from the low end to the high end?
Well, we look for projects which most of them are nature-based. So we have a number of nature-based products in there. One is in Borneo, avoided deforestation. Another one is in Brazil, again, protecting the habitat for various flora and fauna. So the nature-based approach is quite close to our heart. However, we know that people are also looking for other credits as well. We tend to avoid, for example, large-scale hydro. Large-scale hydro, some people, and again, we're not a political organization, and but large-scale hydro can often be unpopular with some organizations, because it ends up displacing a lot of communities, etc., in the process of producing the carbon offsets. We find that wind is very popular. Effectively, we are responding to consumer demand, Mary, in many cases. But when we find a really great project, such as the African cook stoves, we think, well, what a great thing. That's a really interesting way, and it's also an interesting story for the businesses to tell. because clearly this is good for business as well. We're not just talking about being good for the environment here. If you're able to tell your clients, your customers, the people who are buying your products and services that you're carbon neutral. And also, if you can say for what we say at TEDx Kings Park is that all our events are carbon neutral. And also, if you plant an extra tree, we have a donor who will plant an extra tree on top of that as well. So, you can get involved. And so it creates this sense of goodwill and this sense of warmth towards the company, and particularly because we're a WA company, we want to succeed in that space. So that's why the Yarra Yarra is appealing to us. But yes, there are lots of other offsets available. If you take a look at our website, you'll see there's a few nature-based ones, but there's some wind farms there as well. And in the back cupboard, as it were, which we don't necessarily sell online because they require special sales processes for those who are really advanced in this area. We have other credits which require a financial services license, for example, to sell them, etc., because they're financial instruments, because the market is changing. So the answer to your question, Mary, is that we want to provide credits which are good quality, which are clearly absolutely well measured. Our Yarra Yarra corridor, for example, is measured to the gold standard. The gold standard is a thing, by the way. I'm not just saying the gold standard as a it actually is an organization, and their assessment, their measures, they do the auditing that goes on, the science behind it. They will not allow us to sell any credits unless they have proven that carbon has already been sequestrated or will be sequestrated in the next 5 years. So that's the guarantee behind all of this. So then we add extra layers like making sure that no one can touch them for 100 years, that sort of thing. Anyway, sorry, I'm waffling on a little bit now, but Charlie, I'll hand back to you.
I think hopefully that's helpful, Mary, just to answer that question. I think these kind of are the kind of questions that do crop up when you're going through this exercise is, am I just throwing my money at something that I can then just forget about this, or actually am I buying something quality? I think the kind of local WA story Gavin was talking about earlier was something that really resonated with us as we thought about our offsets. And was actually something I thought when I first moved to WA was, wouldn't it be cool if you could have a nature corridor running through WA? And then we were chatting with Gavin, that's exactly what they're doing. So I got quite excited about that. So look, we want to bring this to a close. And I hope you feel like you've been able to have your voice heard and, interact and kind of share your thoughts. But we're just going to do a quick roundtable just to wrap up. Just 30 seconds each. Just for the sake of time, because otherwise I've done the maths already. I know if it's longer than that, we'll overshoot our timing by a long shot. But it'd be great to hear from you if you're able to contribute. I'm just going to put something in the chat. But one thing you've taken away, so one thing you've learned from this session, one thing that's been a benefit to you, that maybe you didn't know before, something that's been of interest to you. One action you'll take. So what will you do as a result of this session to kind of move this forward? Something must have motivated you to come onto this call today, that you were attracted to this idea of going carbon neutral or taking a step towards it. So what would you be able to do? And the final thing is anything that you're missing or that you need to move forward. So what we don't want to do is get to the end of this and any of you feel like, I've just got a big roadblock and I still can't move forward. So if there's any way that we can support you or further support action for you personally, then we will do our absolute best to do that, because we're in this to help other businesses succeed. We're not in it for our own benefit and gain. We want to see other businesses be able to do this and do it well. So those three things I think would be really interesting to hear from you. So who would like to go first with their three things? Leah, you're already in the chat, so I'm just going to jump on you. I heard the term voluntold the other week, which I thought was great. Not volunteered, voluntold. So Leah, you're voluntold to go first.
So the action I'm going to take is to work out what my carbon footprint is and start the journey to offset greater carbon and put more money away for my Tesla.
Good choice.
Great goal.
Thanks, Liam. Shall we go to Nicola next? Nicola, you've just adjusted your camera, so.
Yeah, sorry. I was very much one of those people, I'll do it when everyone else starts doing it kind of thing. But I think, no, I need to jump, I need to make the decision, and I just need to go for it. It's a lot cheaper than what I thought, I must admit. I thought it would cost me a lot more. It doesn't sound as hard as I thought it. I thought it was one of those things that you give to somebody else to sort out for you. So I'm definitely going to do that calculation. And I have been dying to get myself a Tesla. Definitely on the bucket list to get one. So yeah, it looks like I'm going to be moving forward with getting myself one of them. And I love the whole yada yada tree planting thing. And I always see that on Bethan's posts on our website, you know, 1 tree planted and stuff. I'm sure you had something on about it. And I'm like, yeah, I need to start doing something. So yeah,
awesome.
Start tonight.
Is this where Charlie promises to buy a Tesla for one of the 100 when we get to 100? Is that
actually sounds like a really good idea?
I'm not Oprah Winfrey, but as much as I'd like to tell you, you've all got a car, but I can't. But yeah, we might end up with a Tesla owners club at the end of this as well. Wouldn't that be nice?
Fantastic.
So
all the
again,
publicity from being in the 100.
Exactly. So look, we should. Yeah, absolutely. And remember, if there's any blockers or anything you're not sure about or anything you need further support with, then just let us know, because we want you to feel like you can walk away and you've got an easy next step as well. So, you know, we're not afraid of those ones as well. But yeah, Bethan, you were voluntold Robert to go next. So. Robert
Dalton to go next.
Okay.
Again, that's twice you've done that to me, volunteering me. So the thing I found outstanding was I couldn't believe it, 16.5 tons per person on average, and that's a massive number. And we all need to do something about it. It's just huge. I can't even imagine what that looks like. I might signing up, by the way, going to work out my number. My biggest roadblock is the fact that I actually work in a shared office space. So I need to do some work. Now, the advantage is that I work in a sustainability hub in Fremantle. So I think it's pretty much an easy sell for me to get them on board. So I'll be walking straight into the owner's office tomorrow morning and saying, we're doing this. Yeah. Otherwise I'm leaving.
That sounds like a great result, Robert.
Yeah, and so, the guys down there, they would love it. So I'll chat to them tomorrow. So Gavin, you might be getting a phone call from me tomorrow to talk about this and getting them on board as well. So
yeah, always welcome. I think if you need to contact me, the details will come through, I guess, Charlie. So that's absolutely fine. And Leo, I noticed you've already linked in, which was very fast. So please feel free.
So Rob's going to voluntold the hub on SX that they're all going to do this now.
I'm not even saying voluntold, I'm telling him.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Let's go to Hillary, shall we? Hello, are you still able to? Yeah.
Hey, yeah, I'm here. So I think I'm kind of in a unique position where I am just starting this business. And so it's kind of neat to be in a position where as I make decisions, I can think about the effects that they'll have on this in real time, rather than having to sort of like retrofit everything and think backwards. So I'm really thankful and grateful to you guys for doing this now, because it kind of sets me up on a path for success, I think. And as you were talking, and as I sort of started seeing all these families and kids pop in, I thought like, yeah, it's, this is great to do for business, but like maybe we as a family should do this. Maybe we should offset our own like Lucas family footprint. And what would that mean? And as I looked at the chart, Gavin, on your website, it was like, wow, these are such interesting categories to think about our use in, and just buckets. Like when we think about what we eat, what we drink, like the waste, all of that, it kind of gives like a real structure to having those conversations with kids. And I really, I mean, I think the thing that I'm missing is just time right now. I just need time to like sit down and get it and think about this and get it done. But again, thank you. This has been awesome.
Can I volunteer to take your very lovely children for a play date with my kids? Give you a couple of hours.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Anytime.
Okay. It's not really me, that would be Pete watching them.
and for Hillary and anyone else in the time bucket, I was there, absolutely. But actually the time taken, or it felt more onerous until I actually sat down and did it. And even if you did the spreadsheet calculator, I've just bit it off a tab at a time. I was like, I'm just going to do one tab. And once I did one tab, you're like, well, it's not actually that painful. I can kind of figure this out, and soon the methodology builds. So time is important. But Hillary, great to hear you can bake it in right from the start of as you're building your business. Oh, that's a really, really exciting place to be in. So, good for you. Excited to follow your journey. Where
Mike?
to next? Mike?
Hi, Mike.
First, a couple of things. Leah made a point about generational inertia and resistance, and which got me thinking about, the getting movement. My teenage children, 22, 20 and 16, go on about the electric car and things like that, but they also want to travel, see the world, do all those sort of things. So it's a challenge. And of course, I set the tone. I've got a board meeting tomorrow in Adelaide. The other directors that I set up this company with are coming from Sydney. Adelaide's where it's based. And during COVID, we met face-to-face, Zoom, and this will be our first meeting in 2 years, face-to-face. So we're really having to nut this value of face-to-face versus virtual and say, what does it actually mean to be in the same room together? And how do you get the best value out of that if you're going to burn carbon? So if you're going to get together, it has to be real for a purpose and achieve something, and you have to offset it. Equally, if you can do most things virtually, then do so. So I think there's a lot of behavioral inertia. What we're used to doing is what we always do. Even the way we started, this should be a couple casual drinks down at the so-and-so, and you think, well, 11 cars driving or 11 Ubers driving to this place versus doing it this way. But there isn't a substitute for meeting people and interacting at that social level. So I think for me, the thing is behaviorally, as well as offsetting, how do we change in a way that keeps life real and worthwhile, but gets the best value out of our carbon emissions? It's a tricky one.
Yeah.
So it's such a good point. And I think the point you made there, Mike, about weighing the cost is this is not free. I think because carbon is invisible, we think it's free, but there is that kind of cost attached to it. So I think that's a really interesting conversation. Do you think that's something you'll be raising tomorrow when you're in person? Is that going to be the time?
We've probably spent most time catching up on the 2 years.
Yeah,
there are things you don't talk about when you're on Zoom. Absolutely. Because you do time limit yourself. The meeting is 1 hour on Zoom and you stick to the hour. You don't carry on the conversation during coffee at lunch and so on. You don't, when you're at the hotel, you don't carry on the conversation and do far more. You end the Zoom meeting. And that equally though, the other board that I'm on is a community legal centre, and they're a tenant of a local government authority, and it's an old building. So the notion that LGAs want to ensure that their suppliers, the people they contract and deal with, are carbon neutral, should apply to those organisations they host and are landlords for. So there's an interesting battle, if you like, to go on there as well, is that it's not one way, it's both ways. So I think, and then as a sole trader, I take the point that I do my own stuff, but certainly being on the board of two, it's really steering things and making sure that something starts, that there isn't an inertia, depending on we're busy or we're short of resources and so on.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah. Do we want to, Liam? Hello. I haven't spoken to you. Did you want to chip anything in there?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I guess what I've taken away is it's great that there's a whole group of us that are passionate about the same thing, and getting involved in the SME business space as well. I think it's great. Action I'll take from this: we're working from carbon neutral. I'll spread the word of Join the 100. I've already started doing that in my network, so I'll keep doing that. And I'm not really missing anything. I'm just looking forward to getting stuck into it with everyone. And I'm here to, if anyone has any questions or needs any help along the way, along with Gavin and Pauna.
Fabulous. Okay. And Pauna, did you? I don't know if you're still there. Seance moment. Is there anybody there? Anyone? No.
And Mary as well. Wait, love to hear from you as well.
I'm still here.
Oh, you are there. You are there.
Yeah, so it's just been really good to hear everyone's ideas and just kind of get a chance to know what people's knowledge or level of readiness and whatnot. And as Gavin said, you know, we're here to help. It doesn't matter how far ahead you know, or you know what your goals are. We're always here to help you. So just if anybody has any further questions, feel free to let us know, and we could always work out what's the best option now, and even look to the future in 2, 3, 5 years time. So really lovely meeting everybody, and hopefully we'll be able to meet in person or online again sometime soon.
Lovely. Mary, over to you.
Oh, thank you. This was great. It was a really great discussion, and I found there was lots of detail, particularly in what Gavin was saying, that was kind of new to me. Even little details like that the greenhouse gas inventory was an equivalent term for carbon footprint, and little things like that just kind of help when you're in these conversations and knowing what people are referring to. But I think you can't overemphasize the value of going first now on this stuff. I think to be able to tell the story that you are a carbon neutral business now is like its moment has arrived. But the moment to be first is obviously a brief one. It's a brief window. So it's just a really cool thing to see that. I mean, you're talking about needing to be carbon neutral by 2050. Everyone here is going to be carbon neutral within the next 12 months, I imagine. So, that's 2050 is like a generation away. So it's just an exciting time to sort of be able to add this part to your story. I think that's kind of the bit that I'll be enthusiastically spruiking coming away from this.
Fabulous. Love a bit of an enthusiastic spruik. So that's
yeah.
Oh, speaking of enthusiastic spruiking, are we all happy if I take a quick, the typical like Muppet Show Zoom, lots of smiley faces kind of picture? Is everyone good with that? If you don't want to, then switch off your camera now. Yes? Okay, we're all looking, have a look at Gavin too, with the whole eyebrows thing. All right, we're all looking fabulous. Can we say, yay, carbon neutral, going carbon, something exciting. Join the 100, yeah. Amazing. Oh, there was jazz hands. Love some jazz hands. Thank you. See you on a social media platform near you. And if you don't already know, we are trying to maintain a LinkedIn presence and an Instagram presence for the project. So you'll see the tiles coming up if you follow those. And please do follow and, like and share and comment and tell your friends and all of that jazz to go with that. Charlie, did you want to say something profound?
Well, I don't know whether it's profound. That's put me under a lot of pressure. But what I would like to say is, thanks again for joining, giving your time to be here, and for the passion that you showed at the end. By my tally, there's 3 or 4 people on the call here that are ready to make the move pretty much instantly, and bring a few other people along for the ride with them, which I think is just awesome. But I said it at the beginning. This is intention. Is it that it's a very organic, community-owned community. So we want you to feel the sense of ownership. You can come back next time when we next have a meeting, when we next have a gathering, and bring somebody else with you. Don't rely on me and Bethan to do all the invites. It's not going to be that kind of like central organization. We see this as very kind of democratized. So if you've got a friend who's running a business, or somebody, or you can share a post, or you can invite someone to like the page, or anything to do what you can to help spread the word, because we do see this as gaining momentum, and Mary took the words right out of my mouth. There's going to be a very short window to be first, but you're all going to be first, and perhaps there's some other people you want to bring with you to be first. So that's exactly it. So we look forward to seeing you at the next one. We hope you can join us at the next one. In the meantime, stay in touch, and if there's anything we can do to support you on the journey, then we would love to do that.
Thanks, guys.
So that's it.
Thank you so much.
Good to see
Have a
you.
good evening.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Like a game show.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Liam.
Hey, thank you.